Hello, my lovely weirdos. Welcome back to another episode of Dark Crossroads. This is your host, Roxanne Fletcher, and I know that this time of the year can be extremely stressful and busy, so I hope that you all are taking time for yourselves and having a wonderful holiday time with your family and friends. Maybe just listening to this podcast or some of your other favorite podcasts will help you relax and calm down during this very hectic time of the year. Today, in honor of the holiday season, we are going to be covering the Christmas Eve Massacre. It is a very sad and jarring case, so I'm just going to give a trigger warning here in the beginning that there is a lot of death, and some of it is a little gory. I don't go into too much detail, but it is there. It also is a very sad case because it did happen on Christmas Eve and affected many lives. So if that is something that will affect you too, just maybe skip this episode and go on to the next one. With that said, let's just jump right in. On October 24th of 2008, the Ortega family invited all 5 of their adult children, and their families also, to their home in Covina, California, which at the time had a reputation for being a quiet and low-crime community, which was located about 22 miles east of Los Angeles. The Ortegas, Joseph, who was also known as Papa Joe, and his wife of 53 years, Alice, absolutely loved Christmas. And it was also their favorite time of the year to spend time with their 2 oldest sons, James and Charles, and their daughters, Letitia, Alicia, and Sylvia. That Christmas Eve, the family were gathered in the dining room playing a late-night game of Texas Hold'em. The grandchildren were playing video games and computer games, and were also hanging out near the backyard pool. The party was in full swing, and everyone was enjoying spending quality family time together. So far, this seems like a happy and joyful Hallmark movie, but things are quickly about to take a dark turn. In the middle of their holiday celebration, the doorbell rings, followed by the squeal of an 8-year-old girl happily crying out, "It's Santa Claus! It's Santa Claus!" What unfolds after this is incredibly gruesome. So, just a trigger warning, if you don't want to hear any of the gory parts, maybe skip forward a little bit. Shortly after the doorbell rang, local police received a 911 call from the Ortega's neighbors. The caller was crying and telling dispatchers, "Come quick, they're burning down somebody's house." The fire department was dispatched while more calls were coming in with reports of hearing gunshots coming from the house also. When police arrived, it was total chaos. One officer said, "When I arrived, to describe it as apocalyptic would be accurate." The relatives also painted a horrific scene of a gunman bent on carrying out executions and relatives struggling not only to escape, but to save their loved ones amid all the panic. The only family members police were able to find was Letitia, who had thankfully managed to escape with her husband and her 8-year-old daughter. They were able to make it to a neighbor's house to get help. But Letitia's daughter, however, had been shot, so they had already made their way to the hospital. When the details of that night were finally revealed, everyone who heard it was shocked, to say the least. Someone dressed as Santa Claus had unexpectedly arrived at the Ortega home and had just begun shooting. In the middle of investigating the chaotic scene, police also received a tip from a neighbor. She and her husband had seen a car leaving their cul-de-sac at around 11:45 p.m. After putting out an APB, an all-points bulletin, on the car, police started sifting through the Ortega's scorched home. They found bodies burned beyond any recognition, which were later identified as the missing Ortega family members. A total of 9 people were murdered. While police were busy investigating this Christmas Eve massacre, investigators in neighboring Sylmar, California, were called to the home of Brad Parda. He had returned home from a Christmas party to find his brother, Bruce, lying dead in a pool of blood. Once they arrived, police found a single shot from a 9mm handgun in Bruce's head. There was a 9mm pistol in Bruce's lap, and there was a second 9mm on the floor. Police also found another bullet hole in the ceiling, which made them believe that there might have been a second shooter at the scene. Looking into Bruce's past, investigators discovered he had an ex-wife named Sylvia Ortiz, whose divorce from Bruce was finalized on December 18, 2008, just a few days before the holiday. Police dug deeper into their divorce to find out if it had anything to do with Bruce's death, and then they suddenly realized Sylvia's maiden name, which was Ortega. This meant that she was one of the Ortega siblings who had been killed on that Christmas Eve. At this point, police obviously did not think that their deaths were purely coincidence, and they believed that their suspect was still at large. When they performed autopsies on the bodies from the Ortega house, they found all of the victims had been shot at least once with a 9mm handgun. On Christmas Day, police also interviewed Letitia, who said that despite the Santa Claus costume, the fake beard, and the hat, she could definitely identify the shooter. It was her sister's ex-husband, Bruce Pardo. Investigators then went back to Bruce's house, where Bruce was found dead, and searched his car, which ended up being the same car the Ortega's neighbors had described seeing on their street after the murders. Inside the vehicle, police found a Santa suit and thousands of rounds of ammunition. The car had also been booby-trapped to explode once the Santa suit was removed, and though the vehicle exploded, nobody was injured, thank God. Once Bruce's autopsy was finished, investigators were able to conclude that he had actually committed suicide, and that there was no second shooter. The autopsy also revealed he had horrific third-degree burns on his hands and his arms, and part of the Santa pants had melted to his body. Around the same time, a man reported a mysterious car that was parked in front of his Pasadena home. Police ran the plates and found that the car had been rented by Bruce Pardo. Though the car wasn't rigged, it was packed with supplies, including a computer, extra clothes, water, food, and maps of the United States and Mexico. Police believed that Bruce had been planning on escaping to Mexico after his killing spree. Bruce's getaway car was also parked about 500 feet from the house of Scott Nord, who just happened to be Sylvia's divorce attorney. Police believed Bruce might have been also planning on murdering Scott, who had resided over their somewhat contentious proceedings through their divorce. On top of the getaway car, police had also discovered that Bruce had bought a plane ticket ahead of time to Illinois, and this was probably another backup plan of his to escape after the massacre. When Bruce arrived at the party that night, many of the adults were at the front of the house because people were beginning to leave, packing up their things and saying goodbye to family, making them very vulnerable in this attack. According to relatives, one of the Ortega sons, who was Charles, recognized Bruce after he had shot his 8-year-old niece and his older brother, James. "It's Bruce," at least one person reportedly cried out. Charles Ortega was shot after his brother James was hit. Irma Chepa Ortega, a first cousin to the adult Ortega children, who lives in Torreon, Mexico, said James and Charles Ortega struggled to get up even after they were wounded. Even bloodied, they got up. They stood up, she said. They tried to grab him, to stop him, but they couldn't. The elder Ortegas, Joseph, who was 80 years old, and Alicia, who was 70, and their 3 daughters, slipped under the dining room table, along with at least one daughter-in-law. During all of this, somebody started screaming, "Run, run!" The Ortegas may have been killed while in the dining room, along with 2 of their daughters, Sylvia and Alicia. "I heard the shots," Letitia told the police dispatcher in the 911 call. "Everyone started panicking and running, and we all dove under the dining room table." Chepa Ortega said her cousin, Letitia, made a break for it after seeing her wounded daughter staggering out of the house. It has also been reported that, although Bruce shot this little girl in the face the child may have saved herself by turning her head just at the last moment. The bullet had struck her along the side of the jaw, and it was stated that it is possible that Bruce had lifted the girl up before shooting her. Some of the adults grabbed the children and tried carrying them out. Investigators believe that almost all of the younger people were saved because they happened to be in the back of the house, closer to the television or possibly playing video games, when Bruce opened fire on this family. Although the 8-year-old was wounded, as was a 16-year-old girl who was shot in the back, the only minor killed in this attack was Michael Ortiz, a 17-year-old who was sitting at a computer on the second floor. Chepa Ortega said Michael was apparently killed by the explosion or fire started by 2 tanks that Bruce had fused together to create a device capable of quickly engulfing the home in fire. A law enforcement source said that it appears that Michael was killed as a result of the fire or explosion and was not shot. Michael Ortiz's mother, Alicia Ortiz, the daughter of Joseph and Alicia Ortega, was also killed. In June of 2008, Bruce Pardo was ordered to pay $1,785 a month in spousal support. When his divorce was finalized shortly before the holidays, the spousal support ended up being waived as at the time he had lost his job. In July of 2008, Bruce's employer realized that Bruce had been fraudulently billing clients for hours he didn't actually work, and he was fired. A reporter said this divorce shattered Bruce Pardo. It became his obsession, and Bruce began to plot ways to get back at Sylvia. I think that he decided that he wasn't just going to kill her, but he was going to kill everything that she loved, and take it and wipe it off the face of this earth. During his Christmas Eve killing spree, Bruce pulled out a homemade flamethrower to spray 18 gallons of gasoline into the house once he ran out of bullets. But what Bruce didn't take into account or realize when entering this house was that there was an open flame somewhere inside of the house. This led to an explosion that left him horrifically burned. So instead of driving to kill Sylvia's divorce attorney, Bruce drove 40 miles to his brother's home in Sylmar, where he committed suicide because of how bad his burns were. Los Angeles County Coroner's Office said that there was an exit wound at the top of Pardo's head, suggesting that he put the gun in his mouth before pulling the trigger. Police believe he did not initially intend on committing suicide because there was no note found. Chepa Ortega angrily stated he wanted to kill everyone, even his own mom. A monster. He's a monster. That man was a monster. He killed good, hardworking people who had many friends and who loved the United States of America. Chepa also stated, "My uncle, Joseph Ortega, adored my mother, who was his sister. Whenever he would leave us after a visit, he would kiss her and tell us, 'Take very good care of my sister.'" Chepa Ortega recalled, "She knows nothing. The doctors won't let us tell her. The doctors say that she can't know. She'll die if she finds out." As for the survivors of this horrific event, 5 years after the man dressed as Santa Claus massacred 9 members of her family on Christmas Eve, the surviving daughter of the Ortega clan worked to master her mother's pozole recipe to serve at a traditional family dinner that's now forever tinged with tragedy. The recipe was one from Letitia's childhood memories and a reminder of festive meals that she had not enjoyed since Bruce Pardo walked through the door of her parents' home in Covina, California, and killed her family and burned the place down. In a matter of minutes, Letitia lost nearly everyone she'd looked up to, her parents, her 2 brothers, and her 2 sisters. But she was far from alone in her losses. 13 sons and daughters lost at least one parent that night. Letitia, the youngest of the 5 children, became the reluctant matriarch, maintaining the tight-knit family's traditions and the happier memories. The remaining family meets for dinner, exchanges gifts, and share their memories. Bruce, Letitia's former brother-in-law, had made a plan and carried a small arsenal of guns and fuel to torch the family's home that Christmas Eve. It was part of a plan triggered by his ex-wife's decision to divorce him. An FBI profile found that his actions were likely spurred by extreme narcissism and obsessive-compulsive disorder. When Bruce was severely burned in the attack, he ditched his elaborate getaway plan and killed himself with a gunshot to the mouth. Meanwhile, Letitia's family scrambled to pick up the pieces. With his parents dead, one nephew became the guardian of his 3 minor siblings. Letitia and her husband took in her sister's youngest daughter, and her then 8-year-old daughter, Katrina, was wounded by a gunshot to the cheek after Santa Claus came to the door. Letitia worked to save Christmas for her kids, telling them that that wasn't the real Santa Claus, and calling friends from the hospital to make sure gifts were put under their tree. The kids were later sent to a camp that helps with grief. For Letitia, who at this time was 41, years of therapy have helped her, though she still suffers from some anxiety and nightmares. She has stated, "I lost my identity completely. I always used to tease them that I have 5 sets of parents, everyone telling me what to do and now how to do it. I can't even tell you how much I miss them." An overwhelming but hard to describe feeling of loss often sneaks up on her, especially at Christmas time. Everywhere you turn, there are memories of what we used to have, and then memories of that night. You can't escape it, Letitia said. Christmas will always be there, and we continue to celebrate it. The family has been especially touched by others' tragedies. When a Connecticut woman lost her 3 daughters and parents in a house fire, Letitia encouraged her daughters to write letters to this woman. And also, when a gunman killed 20 children and 6 adults at a Newton school, they again wrote letters. Katrina usually writes, "It'll be hard, but just have hope. Please don't give up." Letitia says, "We have to keep moving in our everyday moments. There are those moments we think we've been through the worst, so this cannot break us." For the small Covina Police Department, whose officers responded to one of Los Angeles County's worst mass murders, memories still persist. The 10 detectives who worked the case all remain with the department. Some of them sometimes still swing by the now empty lot where the murders took place, saying that they can still smell the smoke in the air. The case, with its house fire, many crime scenes, and multiple victims on a rainy holiday, has proven to be a teachable moment for other departments around the country. Though this case has faded to time, the department continues to keep in touch with family and survivors, pursuing leads and following up on any details regarding this case. And it is always in their mind, especially around Christmas. While wrapping up this case, I just wanted to put my main focus on all the people that lost their lives that night on Christmas Eve in 2008. Sylvia Pardo, 43 years old. Sylvia's friend Roxanne met Sylvia when the two registered for high school at Sacred Heart of Mary in Montebello almost 3 decades before. Looking for friendly faces among the new crowd, the 2 young women from Monterey Park became very fast friends because they were from the same neighborhood. Roxanne's father took them to school in the morning, and Sylvia's mother would pick them up in the afternoon. "We would do everything together, dances, school functions, house parties," Roxanne said. Sylvia's family went camping in Kings Canyon National Park every year, and Roxanne often tagged along. The two remained close over the years, even when Sylvia attended a different high school after her family moved to Covina during her sophomore year. Sylvia was always interested in business and took a job as a secretary right out of high school. "We would laugh at her shorthand," Roxanne said. She enjoyed her work. Family members said that Sylvia was a hard worker, yet carried a cheerful demeanor. But her life was not without hardship. The father of her 2 oldest children was killed in a car crash in Arizona. She was a widow for many years, until she married George Orza, whom she apparently met through work. The couple had a daughter, but later divorced, and he now lives in Oklahoma. Sylvia then met Bruce Pardo. At first, the marriage seemed ideal. He lived alone in a sparsely furnished house, and she had 3 children and plenty of furniture. The marriage began disintegrating when Sylvia discovered that Bruce Pardo had abandoned a brain-damaged son years ago, but continued to claim him as a tax write-off. 1 week before Bruce Pardo's murderous rampage, the couple appeared before a judge to finalize a divorce agreement. He would keep the house, and she would get $10,000 payment and the family dog. Next person was Joseph Ortega, who was 80 years old. Joseph was the first of his parents' 5 children to be born in the United States. Santiago Ortega and Dolores Sandoval had immigrated in the 1920s from the city of Torreon in northern Mexico. Their oldest son, Alfonso, would become a U.S. citizen and fight in World War II. Santiago and Dolores moved back to Mexico about 10 years later, and Joseph Ortega came to see his older brother as a kind of second father. When Alfonso Ortega died at the age of 97, it affected my uncle very deeply, states Irma Chepa Ortega. Growing up, Joseph Ortega disliked the name Joseph. A family member called him Jimmy because he could not pronounce his real name, and Ortega took that name as his own. He would meet his future wife, Alicia, during a visit to his parents in Torreon in 1955. They moved to LA almost immediately. The couple named their first child James. They ended up having 5 children, and with his wife's help, Ortega started an industrial paint company in Baldwin Park. The couple eventually bought a 2-story home with a pool in the suburb of Covina that became a center of family life. Papa Joe, as he was called, loved to collect baseball hats and tried to wear a new one every day. He was a fan of popular Mexico singers Javier Solis and Vicente Fernandez, as well as Frank Sinatra and Glenn Miller. He liked to play Texas Hold'em, and he owned a racehorse that would compete at Santa Anita Racetrack. The patriarch and his large brood of children, grandchildren, and other family members also liked to take trips to Las Vegas or go camping in Sequoia National Park. The next family member is Alicia Ortega, who was 70 years old. Once a month, Alicia Ortega would pick up the phone and call her 2 sisters in Torreon, Mexico. "Hola, hola, how are you?" she would say before launching into a marathon of conversations with her siblings. Alicia cultivated strong ties to her ancestral home. She and her husband of 53 years, Joseph, whose family also had deep roots in Torreon, would visit the Mexican town at least twice a year. Alicia was born in Torreon in 1938. Joseph Ortega was 27 years old when he first spotted Alicia, who at the time was 17, standing in front of her parents' home. "I'm going to marry her," he said. Joseph returned to woo the pretty, well-dressed girl, and after getting Alicia's parents' consent, he took her to the theater and to dinner. Not long after, the couple married and moved to Los Angeles, where they had their 5 children. Like her husband, Alicia was a fan of Santos, the Mexican League soccer team, from her hometown. Her husband liked to play blackjack, poker, and Texas Hold'em during trips to Las Vegas, but Alicia Ortega spent most of her time playing quarter video poker. Neighbors said Alicia also doted on her 2 dogs, a mutt and an Alaskan husky. A neighbor to the couple once stated, "When you walked into a room, every one of the Ortega children would get up and give you a kiss and a hug. They were the most respectful family I'd ever known, and it all started with Joseph and Alice." The next family member is James Ortega, who at the time was 52 years old. James was Joseph and Alicia's eldest son, and he worked for years alongside his father at the family's paint shop in Virginia Avenue in Baldwin Park. In the early 1980s, he opened his own shop about a mile away on Dalewood Street, but often had lunch with his brother and father. Family members have stated that James was more serious than his brother, Charles, and he was also more of a homebody who, along with his wife, Teresa, stuck close to his immediate family. The couple together had 3 children. The next family member is Teresa Ortega, who at the time was 51 years old. Teresa was married to James Ortega and lived in Upland in a 2-story home on Lemon Tree Circle. Friends and family members declined to talk about her, except to say that she was a very caring mother to her 3 adult children. Charles Ortega, who at the time was 50, was known for challenging co-workers at his job to a game of basketball at an old hoop in the back of the store. He was never particularly good, but that didn't stop him. He was very physical for a basketball player, but he couldn't shoot if you left him open, said family friends. Charles liked baseball much more than basketball, but that didn't mean he wasn't going to try it. Many have said that Charles was always full of energy and recalled how he reacted when he saw one of his family's horses collapse during a race at Santa Anita. Charlie hopped the rail and tried to save this horse. He was like knee-deep in dirt. Charlie was definitely a passionate type of guy. Charles met his wife, Cherie, when she was in high school, and the two quickly became sweethearts. They later married and together had 5 children. Their sons played baseball, and the entire Ortega family would attend their games. It was also stated that every single day, Charles would eat lunch with family. It was stated, you usually don't spend that much time with your dad and brother, but these guys were together every single day. The next person is Cherie Ortega, who at the time was 45 years old. Teachers at Grove Center Elementary would sometimes raise an eyebrow when Cherie Ortega would show up early on Fridays. They knew that the family was going on a trip together, and that usually meant her children would miss Monday also. They would take all of the kids out of school a little early on Fridays, and they would go to the desert and go dirt bike riding. A family friend stated that the school used to kind of get upset with her for doing this, but that she was really glad that she had that time with her kids because it was really important. She states that they would do everything together. Everywhere they went, the whole family went. Cherie met her future husband, Charles Ortega, while in high school when she came to help out at the paint shop owned by his father. They went to Cherie Ortega's senior prom at Bassett High School in 1981 and later married. Cherie Ortega would sometimes help out at her husband's paint shop, but she lived for her 5 children and a tight-knit family life. Sometimes she would show up at school just to bring her youngest son, who at the time was 11, lunch and to make sure that he was doing okay. Usually in 5th grade, you wouldn't see little boys saying, "I love you, Mom," and giving them a kiss at the lunch table in front of everyone, but they had that special bond that made it so that they were able to do this. The next family member is Alicia Ortiz, who at the time was 46 years old. Alicia had 3 children who spoke perfect Spanish. Family members state that she was very strict. She states that the children wrote in Spanish and they read it very well. She educated them very well. She wasn't a scolder, but she was strict about their studies. She wanted them all to be very good. Alicia, who friends said was recently divorced, had lived with her children in Ontario, 2 blocks away from the high school where her son, Michael Ortiz, was enrolled and played baseball. Matthew Horner, 25, said Alicia was his godmother and worked at a school. She was just a wonderful woman, a caring, good person, he states. She was someone I could always talk to whenever I had any problems. The next person is Michael Ortiz, who at the time was 17 years old. Michael Ortiz's baseball team was down a few runs in an all-star game, and the rest of the bench looked glum. "Don't sit down," Ortiz told his teammates, trying to fire them up. "Get off your butts and play." He kept talking and got the team up, and we ended up winning the game, remembered Julio Martinez, who said he grew up playing Little League and other youth leagues with Ortiz and was at this game. "Always looks at the bright side," Martinez said of his family's philosophy about life. A senior at Ontario High School, Michael Ortiz was poised to be the team's shortstop this season and was one of the Jaguars' best pitchers, with a mean changeup, said the school varsity's baseball coach at the time. Michael Ortiz made varsity his junior year and wore number 19. When Ortiz tried out for the team as a freshman, it was remembered that he was small but had good hands and swung the bat well. He was also a good student and thought about going to Cal State Fullerton. "He's one of those kids that you were never worried about," stated one of his teachers. "I would always glance at his grades, and they were always perfect." In his free time, friends said that Michael Ortiz could be found hanging out with his girlfriend, playing sports, and playing video games, or mixing his own hip-hop beats. But Michael Ortiz's uncle, Benny Medina of Diamond Bar, said his nephew was already thinking about his future. He was going to make it, said Medina. He was going to be somebody. For my resources for this episode, I just wanted to put down that we used Wikipedia, CBSNews.com, A&E, and Oxygen. And I also got a lot of this information from other podcasts. I actually decided to do this case by listening to Morbid and them covering this case, and it was also covered by Snapped, Mombies, Check the Locks, and Bailey Sarian Murder Mystery Makeup. Alright guys, thanks for hanging out again today. Don't forget to check back for our next episode soon. I hope that you enjoyed the episode today. I just wanted to make it a little holiday themed in honor of Christmas and Hanukkah and everything else going on. The next case, I am looking at doing an urban legend / conspiracy theory, and then we're going to get back to the true crime. So if you're not into that, the true crime will be back soon. But if you're interested in all the other creepy corners of the entire world, check back for the next episode. And if you want to support the podcast, follow us on any social media, and you can also join our special subscriber page. You can choose how much you want to donate to us, and when you do, you get all extra bonus content along with promo codes and a lot of other goodies, extra episodes. I will be putting a lot of those out soon. And all of the case suggestions that have been sent in to me, I have been getting them. I just want you guys to know that. And I have been digging deep into them. Some of them I'm having to do a lot of research for, but it is happening and they will be coming out soon. And thank you all so much for the support and for sending in any case suggestions or scary stories. Alrighty guys, so I will talk to you guys later, and happy holidays. Dark Crossroads Podcast is brought to you by Problem Wildlife. Problem Wildlife serves all of Western Massachusetts and has been humanely protecting your house and your family from unwanted pests for over 20 years. Take back your space with an animal control service that you can trust. They are family-owned, fully licensed, and are knowledgeable and dependable. To find out more about their services, simply visit their website at www.problemwildliferemoval.com. Again, that is www.problemwildliferemoval.com, and their information will be included in our show notes.